Video we're going to run through how to make simple renderings in Revit. So to do that, first we got to have our 3D view. So here's the 3D view I'm going to start with. Right now it is set up probably in one of these settings, probably realistic. Maybe not. Wasn't realistic. So just to go through the different display styles. So what I just clicked on was realistic. So what that does is it takes all the image maps and tries to do its best job of mapping them everywhere. That's why it took a little while. Constant colors is something I never really use. It kind of looks like SketchUp. Shaded. That's sometimes what we use to rotate around a model. It's still not great for presentation. And hidden line. And hidden line can be good for presentations if you get all your settings right. So what you would want to do in a rendering like a situation like this is you could consider making it a hidden line, and you could adjust its graphic display options. Maybe turn on ambient shadows, which makes everything look a little bit better. You can also turn on, under lighting, you can give it more ambient light. And maybe tone down our shadows a bit. So that's not a terrible look just by itself. Hidden line can work really well in a lot of situations. But here we're going to talk about how to actually render. So with that, we have to come down to this little teapot. Obviously, with rendering, it's all dependent on your materials. So before you click the teapot, you do want to go around and make sure you have materials correctly mapped. But if I click the teapot, it comes up with our render dialog. And previously, we used to have a mental ray and a ray trace rendering options up here. And rightfully, Autodesk has dumped mental ray because its renderings really weren't very good. So I'm going to take you through the process of making a decent, quick rendering. What you can do is, if you're wondering what an area looks like, you can actually set the region to only render a small region, so you can see how your lighting is going. And you can set that kind of to a lower quality. It could be medium or draft, and even just use the screen resolution and click render, just to see what happens. My laptop is going to take a little while. I might pause it while it renders, just so we can get this going a little quicker in the video. So here's our progress bar. It's almost done. And here's our draft quality image over here. So you can look at it. You can see if you like the way the sun's coming in and how everything's working. And we'll go through all the settings here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to say show the model, and I'm going to be ready to render the region. I don't know if this is the best time of day to be doing this, so what we can do is look at our sun settings, and maybe instead of 7 a.m. we can make it a little later in the day. Let's see, what, 10 a.m. and you should be able to see, this must face straight south. You should be able to see the sun passing around. So let's get a little later, maybe 3 p.m. Alright, so then we get a little more sun coming in from the side, bouncing around. Alright, so to do an actual rendering, what I would recommend is set it to be a printer resolution of at least 150. Look at how many pixels you're rendering, and right now this is kind of low. That would be low. Of course, this project is in metric for some reason. That can always be changed. Alright, so now we're back to inches. So I might want to do this in 300 dpi, or what you can do is if you're planning on printing this larger than 7 by 4 inches, what you do is you back out, click on the edge of the image, and you size the image correctly. Since it's a perspective, it doesn't really have a size unless you give it to it. So I can keep my scale locked, and I can say, I think this is going to come out on 11 by 17. So you can make it larger to fit on a sheet like that. And then what we'll do is I might still bump up my DPI. You can even type in what you want to. But normally a quick trick for a fast rendering is to keep this under 2000 pixels. It helps it render a little faster. So for now, I'm just going to leave it at 150. This is important. If you're rendering exterior and you're only using the sun, you would set this up to be an exterior sun only. But right now, we are on the inside, and I'm not using any of my artificial lights in here. So I am saying it's interior sun only. And then you can decide if you want clouds or not. Sometimes it's nice just to give yourself a white color in the background so that it blends in with the rest of your drawing sheet, assuming you're printing on white paper. So those are some decent settings to start off. So without messing with the exposure at all, I'm going to hit render, and then I'm going to skip ahead to when this rendering is complete so we can look and see what we have and how we can export it out. Alright, so we're coming into the finish line here. So I've been rendering only for about 2 minutes, which is not too bad, and it's just about done. And just looking at it as it's finishing, we can see that we're pretty overexposed in some locations here. And so now the rendering's finished, and I can actually come in to adjust exposure, and we can start to work some of this a little bit, very subtly. See, it changes a lot depending on what you move, slight movements you make. So what you can do is find a better exposure rate. And normally I just play with exposure. This sample file has a lot of these other items touched up. But right now I like to play with the exposure. And that's a simple way to get started with this. I hit OK, and I'm going to export out my JPEG. So this is living room. Save. And what you can do is you can also adjust exposure several times, kind of like how an architectural photographer would, to make some locations look better at different exposure rates. Let's say I want to go back to 9-ish. Actually, just type in 9. Because I like the way this wall looked when I was exposed, and I think the carpet looks a little bit better. So, I hit OK. Export again. I'm going to call this one 9. And what I'm doing is I just created a couple different exposures, and I want to take this into Photoshop. So let's show model again. And now when I show the model, I'm going to turn off my shadows and make sure that my ambient shadows are not turned on. And the reason why I'm doing this is I just want the line work. That's all I want to get out of this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to print this to a PDF. So I'm going to say print to a PDF. We know this fits on 11 by 17. We don't want it to fit the page. We want it to be 100%. Nope. You can preview it to make sure it's looking right. Yep. All right, and I'm going to hit print. So once that PDF is printed, I'm going to jump into Illustrator and load the PDF. Since I turned all my shadows off, what happens is the PDF is actually vector-based line work. So you can see this is actually all line work. These are all little dots. Make sure I release everything. The only reason for coming in Illustrator right now is I want to make sure all my line work has no background fill. So right here, no background fill. Stroke, it can all remain black, and you can actually pick out a size if you want it to be like a hairline. Or you can actually edit some of your line work in here before we bring it into Revit. So what I actually just did was delete out the background. And then this is all line work that we can edit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this file. I just save it as an Illustrator file. And we're going to jump into Photoshop. And we're going to open all of our stuff up. You definitely want to make sure when you rasterize the line work that you do it at the same resolution as you're rendering. That way what we can start to do is I'm going to start layering all this stuff. That one. And the two renderings are the exact same size. Drag my layer in here. Get my line work in. Alright. So with everything layered on top of itself, with everything on top of itself, I'm going to move my line work into the position that it should be in. And it kind of snaps into place. I do like to use the line work because it makes it look like it's an image that you're not trying to be the most photorealistic thing. Because Revit never really will be perfectly photorealistic. And if the line work is a little out of scale, you can come in and transform it. Make it all snap on the corners where it's supposed to be. This isn't too far off. But there we go. Alright, so with that applied, you could see even it took my more burnt out image and made it a little bit better because it left some corners for us. So here's the really burnt out image. And what you can do with the line work that I think is kind of neat is we can use the magic wand tool and select specific faces. And let's say this is too burnt out. I can delete that section and use the less burnt out version. So in a way, it helps you make selections within the model too, because see if we get the floor. All those dots look like they're causing trouble. But you can use that line work. Let's see. And then delete the overexposed version. Or you can come in and kind of do the normal thing where you trace out, which takes a lot longer. Let's say we didn't like how this floor was looking over here. Oops, lost it. And delete the overexposed version to get the darker version. So the line work helps with a couple things. It doesn't make it too photorealistic. Let's see what else we can do. Play a little bit with this. Yeah, and you can really start to tweak your project and get it as simple as possible. And we can also, even if we think the exterior is too distracting, we can always come in and select the window panes. Or if we're trying to focus on the view out, let's duplicate this layer because I can't delete from the background. And I can actually delete out everything except the view out the end. So you can really, using the line work, it helps you select things, it helps you craft things, and then you can always turn it off at the end. But it does help give a little more definition to the things that you spend time drawing. So it's just something to consider when you're putting together these renderings. And that's it. That's a very quick run through of how to assemble a multi-exposure rendering coming from Revit in Photoshop and Illustrator.